Hello, and this is the healthcare track, and we're excited. We have some great content for you today. Our next speaker is going to be Jeff Evernham. He's the VP of Customer Solutions at Sinequa. Please join me in welcoming Jeff to our virtual stage.
Thank you, Patricia. Let me share my screen here so we can get the slides up. Okay, well, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be able to talk to you today virtually in this COVID world about how intelligent search may be able to help you both with accelerating drug development plus helping other information challenges that we have in this day and age. As mentioned, I run the customer solutions team at Sinequa, and we provide a software technology that helps you manage information. And I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of how that works, how we solve problems for a number of different pharmaceutical companies, and a brief demo of how it works as well. So you can be entering questions in through the chat window over the course of the presentation, and I can answer those throughout the presentation, or there will be a little bit of time at the end for that as well. So thanks for joining, and we'll jump right in. So you know that there are a lot of things impacting the current life sciences and pharmaceutical landscape. There are constantly increasing demands from patients, from regulators, to drive better quality products and compete with other organizations that are looking to do the same. There are things that are transforming the industry, new ways of creating better engagement with patients to drive innovation. And of course, with that always comes, more, better, faster. Got to get the new drug out and need to get it out as fast as possible and really maximize the value to get that return on the R&D investment that takes place. And then, of course, there are some external factors that are changing the game. Globalization is the first one among those. You've got not only increased competition from around the world as the economy works together at a global level, but there's connectivity happening too, with the ability to collaborate across continents much more easily than ever before. We're seeing an explosion of data being available and the existing healthcare data being digitized. Wearables, real world evidence, all kinds of things are happening where there's more information available than ever before to help inform the decisions that you make. And then, of course, there are new ways to work with that information too. As the computing capabilities continue to expand, we're seeing advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning, still holding a lot of promise for being able to address some of these other demands that I've already talked about in the left portion of the slide. So these are some of the external factors that are impacting us, but there was one other external factor that was kind of a game changer recently, still is. Maybe you've heard of it, and we're still going through the throes of coronavirus, and all that has really done is magnified these challenges because the timetable that is being worked on for this in particular is greatly accelerated. There's a tremendous amount of urgency, so it only exacerbates all of these problems. And those problems don't go away for all of the other aspects that are, still need to happen in terms of drug development and treating other diseases and so forth. So we are at a crazy time where all of this has really impacted this business. The challenges to address those imperatives and those game changers that I just talked about, there are many, but I'm going to talk about three in particular. One is just exploding amounts of content out there. There is so much out in terms of research and data and documents, and it's scattered all over the place, and it's hard to just even know where to start to try to keep current with that. The part of the result of that is wasting time, because the studies have shown that the average employee wastes 2 hours a day searching just to find the kind of information that they need to do their business. And that's just to find it. But on top of that, you end up missing insights because most of the interpretation of that content is still done manually. You have to read the document. You have to look at the numbers. You have to try to put it into the context, understand the source, and then bring multiple pieces of information together and synthesize those. And these challenges, while universal, are magnified for pharmaceutical companies looking to bring drugs to market. First of all, it's not just the structured data. We've invested a lot of time and energy into structuring our content and working with the numbers and the performances. But unstructured content still represents about 80% of the information that's out there, and it's largely untapped because it's much harder to deal with. For wasting 2 hours a day is no big deal when you compare it to the amount that researchers and scientists face, because their jobs are so dependent upon bringing in the right kind of information and making that analysis that they spend even more time looking for the right information. And then they have to do that interpretation that I mentioned before. So spending that time to understand the context and is this applicable to what I'm trying to accomplish, and can this help me move the product further along in the drug pipeline, really is a time-consuming activity. So it slows things down when you have to do that manually, and unfortunately means that other opportunities might be overlooked simply because you didn't have the time to investigate them. So you guys are probably familiar with the information landscape. It looks something like this. As you look to develop drugs, you have to bring together information from so many different places. Structured content, unstructured content, they reside in different systems. Some are internal to your organization, some are external, and there's really, it's just mostly chaos. And like I said, the challenge of bringing all of this information together is exactly what has to happen in that pipeline process. And so what I want to talk to you about is, what if you had help connecting these dots, connecting these systems together so that you could draw insights, have the information that you need more easily without all of that manual labor and cognitive burden that you have to apply to it. That's really what Sinequas mission is, to take the massive amounts of content, data, and everything that exists on the left-hand side in different systems, and to bring order to it, to interpret it, and provide the proper context and analysis to surface not just numbers or words, but to surface information, and to bring that information together in ways that you can see the linkages and the connections specific to your business. So this is our mission. Well, how do we do that? We start by bringing structure to the unstructured data. So we start with all of the enterprise content that exists out there. It can be internal to your organization, it can be external, whether it's a content management system like Office 365 or SharePoint, or whether it's specific to your industry. And with Viva, we do include structured data. You see SAS on there as well. So bringing all of that structured and unstructured content together, we start by having connectors that can reach out to all of these systems and pull in the necessary information, regardless of where it's stored, regardless of its format. Then we use content analytics, natural language processing, including artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth, to analyze all of that information, all of that unstructured content, and bring structure to that content. So we know what drugs are. We can identify what indications are, when it's talking about a person, when it's talking about a location. And bringing all of that information together, we can identify now the content that is important to your business in a way that can bring analytics to bear, and also can identify the connections that exist and the relationships that exist between all of this information. We don't propose to you that you can do this without having a human in the loop at all. Ultimately, the final interpretation comes from that human intervention, but our goal is to reduce the amount of the initial interpretation and analysis of this so that you can really focus on the higher value added tasks rather than just simply reading 60 pages of a document to find out whether or not this is relevant to your research. So I want to give just a quick example of this in action. And I'm going to do that with a public portal that we created called COVID-19 Intelligent Insight. What we did when the pandemic first started and the scientific research started to explode all over the place, there was a need to solve the problems that I mentioned before. All this information was scattered all over the place, and the only way to get to it was to log into different systems, read it, and then draw your own interpretation. So what we did is we assembled what we believe is the world's largest searchable repository of scientific information and papers and research for COVID-19. We have over 128,000 documents at this point in the system, and we layered our intelligent search engine on top of all of that content. And that means that you can quickly find the information that you need. You can look at enriched views of those reports and papers with the document Navigator. And I talked about identifying relationships. You can surface those kinds of relationships by analyzing the content in using a heat map. So I'm going to show you a couple of those things. We don't have a lot of time here, so it's going to be a very brief demo to give you some insights into the capabilities. But I would encourage you to go out and take a look at it yourself. You can find it at covidsearch.sinequa.com. And this is a publicly accessible site to access the latest research on COVID-19. So let me switch to that. Jessica, I'll just do a check. I'm assuming you can see the demo screen now?
Yes, all good here.
All right. Just want to make sure everything's working. So here we have, if you go to covidsearch.sinequa.com, this is our Intelligent Insight portal. And there's information about the website. You can read that, etc. But you have a search bar, and that's really the place to start to find out things that you might be interested in. So we're talking about drug development. Obviously, there's not going to be a ton of drug development information on a public portal, so I'm limited in the content that I can show you. But everybody's racing to get a vaccine right now. So if I start typing, obviously it helps to suggest information based on what I'm looking for. But let's say we want to find out information about a potential vaccine for COVID-19. What we've done now, we've searched across the 128,000 papers, and you can see some of the sources. We have some clinical trials information in here. We have publications that are both preprints and published in various journals, as well as some other policy information as well. So you can see that source information here. In all, we found a little over 9,000 documents related to a vaccine for COVID-19. And we have those on a timeline too. I'm really only interested in the most recent documents. So let's go ahead and click on that. Doesn't look like the results changed because, of course, most of the information is recent anyway. But we can see here that we have various results that are matching our search for the COVID-19 vaccine or the possibility for it. And we can click on a document and see some of the pertinent information associated with it, where this is a published document from the Current Opinion in Immunology Journal. We have extracted the content that is most pertinent based on your search terms. And this is part of the intelligence of the application, that it has identified what drugs, genes, proteins, etc., are mentioned in this content. And so there's always an opportunity to take a look at that in more detail. But let's say we're interested in finding out even more detail on this. So maybe we want to look at the Let's see. Yeah, this was the one I was looking for, sorry. So take a look at this third document. It was just recently published. And so we want to look at the review material. Rather than just opening the document by itself, we're going to open it in the document Navigator. And this provides an enriched view of the content. So we see the paper itself, but we also have identified key extracts relevant to our search. So without having to read the entire document, we can quickly look at the portions of it that are relevant to what we're interested in. So here's where they gathered their information. There's no vaccines available, but there are 19 candidate vaccines, according to the WHO, as of May 27th, with 115 in preclinical evaluation. So I can find all of this without having to read through the document. Of course, if I am particularly interested in an extract, I can click on it and it will take me immediately to that location in the document so that I can get that information in context. So you can see how this can very quickly help you survey the scientific literature and rapidly zoom in on the portion of interest. And of course, this is external, but where Sinequa really shines is by opening up this information to your own internal content. So your own documents about molecules and so forth that are in process, your electronic lab notebooks that your researchers are performing against. So you have access to all of that information internal to your organization, not just external content, which is what we're limited to show in the demo. So I mentioned that the software structures the unstructured content. So I can also look, rather than just looking at overall extracts, let me look at entities of importance. And of course, it's identified a few that are based on my search. But in addition, it's gone and identified all the drugs that are mentioned in this article, all the indications, all the species, and so forth. And I can quickly navigate to those as well. So maybe I'm only interested in mice studies related to this vaccine. So I can highlight that and quickly advance through the document to see where it's talking about mice studies. Or maybe I'm interested in a particular drug. So maybe I want to see about this umifenavir, and I can click on that here, and it takes me to that location in the document. Let's see where we are. So it's not saying umifenavir, it's saying arbidol, because it recognizes that as the drug. There are 8 occurrences, and I can quickly look through the document for all of those references. So you can see that this provides an ability to really get to the core content that's of interest, regardless of the size or complexity or even the format of the document. So I'll come back to our search view here. And so in addition to looking at specific documents, the software helps to guide us. Again, this is part of the intelligent aspect of the search. So it has analyzed my results here and identified some phrases that might be of interest to me. And so it's suggesting some other possible things that might help me in my search. And sure, let's take a look at rapid vaccine development. We're talking about trying to accelerate the time to market for these things. So we can search on that, and now that has been added to my search term, and I'm down to much fewer documents than I had before. So from here, maybe I still can look at an individual document. I can see that information. This is pretty helpful here because there's a consolidated overview of vaccine developments for coronavirus that has been assembled a few weeks ago. But let's say I want to look at relationships that exist between the different documents. I have a heat map view here where instead of seeing search results, I can actually look at co-occurrences that are occurring in different documents. And so anything that the software recognizes, I can use and look at the intersection of those terms appearing in all of the documents that are part of my search terms. So I'm going to keep this at drugs, but I'm going to switch this here to, say, proteins. of COVID-19. And I can quickly see now where these drugs are mentioned in a relationship to certain proteins as well. So if I want to study the interaction of certain drugs and certain proteins in the literature, I can do that here. Now, this is a pretty small amount, so maybe I don't really want the rapid vaccine development. I'm going to go back to my original search without refining the rapid vaccines. So now we're up to 5,000 documents, and you can see that there are a great many returned that show these relationships. And if I'm interested in a particular situation, maybe I want to see how ritonavir is working with this particular protein, then I can click on that, and my search results are then refined specifically to include all the documents that have those two things in relation to one another. So you have a quick way of navigating a really large corpus of information through that heat map and zeroing in on relationships that are important to you. Or one other way of looking at the information is with the extracts view. So if we have a more specific question, and what we want to do is survey the literature out there, or in the case of pharmaceutical companies, survey all the internal information that we have, we can type that into our search box as well. And let's say I'm interested in looking at the adverse effects of umifenavir and see what's currently being talked about that. I have my traditional view here, but I can also go and look at this extract view. And what it's done, rather than providing a document-centric perspective, it is showing a extract perspective. And so you can see here that it's looking specifically for where adverse reactions and arbitral are mentioned together. And so rather than having to scan a whole bunch of documents to try to find something that's of importance, you can quickly scan the most relevant extracts that are of importance. So that's a quick tour through the capabilities of our intelligent search portal. And really, what our goal is to take those information challenges that we mentioned before and solve them. So what do you do about the exploding content? You unify all of that information together, regardless of whether it's structured or unstructured, regardless of what source system it's in, regardless of its format, and bring all of that together so that it's easy to manage across vast amounts of information. What about wasting time? Now you have the ability to find what you need all from one location through simple search terms that we're all familiar with in much the same way as Google, and then provide a variety of navigation tools to refine that information and zero in on what's most pertinent. And what do we do about missing insights? Well, if we're automatically analyzing the content and we have that interpreted in the context of your business, knowing drugs, knowing adverse events, knowing phenotypes, et cetera, then that information has already been partially interpreted for you. And the job that you have in terms of tracking down that information is much easier. So it accelerates your time to market. It accelerates the work that you're doing regardless of the end outcome. So we've worked with a number of large pharmaceutical companies and helped them bring their information assets and make them more usable. And typically what is done is you pick a starting point. There's often a single use case that is a particular burning need. Maybe it's to accelerate R&D. Maybe it's to get a better handle on patient safety or drug safety information. And then typically what happens is once that initial use case is established, there's an opportunity to add additional applications that are much more targeted to solve a specific information problem. So whether it's safety, whether it's accelerating research or clinical trials, working with compliance and making sure that everything is in order, or even to find people rather than documents, the ability to identify when a person is being discussed or mentioned, and then to show the linkages of what that person has been studying and researching allows you to zero in on the expertise, or to provide a unified 360-degree view of a molecule, of a product, of a drug. And you can bring all the information in your entire organization associated with that and display it in one interface. So you see the early stage research, you see the trials, you see the lab experimentation, you see the manufacturing protocols, you see the safety information, you see the adverse events. All of that can now be presented in a single location without having to do a lot of work there. So that really concludes the presentation. I thank you for your attention and welcome any questions. Jessica, I take it by your silence, there haven't been any
I don't have any questions
submitted?
coming in here. Guys, if you want to put anything in the chat, I'm happy to pass it over. Oh, here we go. What impact might this have on accelerating the FDA clinical approval process?
Well, that is an interesting question because we've actually had some conversations with the FDA about that. Nothing specifically has come out of it yet. But we do know, I can give you one example. We worked with a drug company that was having trouble responding to FDA inquiries in a timely manner, because when the inquiry would come in, oh, you have 72 hours to respond. We need all your information on this particular drug or adverse impacts that you've had. And they were having a really hard time assembling all of that information. After they implemented Sinequa, they were able to greatly reduce the manual effort and the synthesis required from that. So responding to the FDA inquiries went from a matter of weeks down to really a matter of hours. And they were able to respond with much greater confidence that they had actually addressed all of the content that they had in their system and provided that to the FDA. So we see this as being able to accelerate the approval process because you have a much greater confidence in that you've been able to look at all of the available information and analyze it thoroughly. So thank you for that question. Any others? Well, I know these were quick sessions and there are probably other ones starting soon. We will stay online for a few more minutes to take any additional questions that you have. If you'd like to try out the search that I showed you, you can go to covidsearch.sinequa.com and try it out yourself. And certainly you have the opportunity